let's dive into the legislative calendar. It seems as if the consensus in D.C. is one big reconciliation bill. What is a reconciliation bill? You've mentioned this previously before. Educate our audience on how this process works so that we can avoid 60 votes in the U.S. Senate.
Right. Well, that's the essence of it. On everything from immigration policy to a Mother's Day resolution, you typically need 60 votes into the Senate to proceed on to anything of substance. And here there is a unique kind of breakthrough on the Senate filibuster that only requires 50 votes plus the vice president if it is budget policy. So there will be an analysis done of everyone's ambitious and goals and ideas for this piece of legislation that already folks are working on this month to see what is true budgetary policy versus what is a policy that is not spending but otherwise in nature. And then that will be excluded from what is negotiated. Now, our friends, the border hawks, will say, darn it, we want every bit of amnesty reform in this bill, and that will be challenging. And then you'll have some of the fiscal hawks saying, well, we won't vote for it unless we get the trillions of dollars cut that Elon Musk has talked about with Doge. And my suspicion is that the big spenders still occupy a sufficient majority in both the House and the Senate once you peel away party labels, and that they will resist that greatly. So I think that, President Trump has got the debt limit to deal with. That could be a function of the reconciliation bill. It's going to be everybody trying to get their priority in this one thing. And ultimately, this is so bizarre, but the Senate parliamentarian is the person empowered to determine whether or not a specific feature of legislation fits inside or outside of reconciliation. How's that for in the weeds for you, Charlie?
Yeah, and so let's dive deeper into that. The Senate parliamentarian, when do they weigh in? Potentially they could weigh in once the bill's already passed the House. Is that correct?
They could, yes, and that's when they have to officially determine whether or not provisions qualify. But here's what will happen. Lobbyists and special interests will go and work the Senate parliamentarian's office to try to get a specific idea or proposal either deemed included or excluded. And so before you even get a ruling from the Senate parliamentarian, you'll have committee chairs and other people who are just vessels of special interests show up to representatives and say, oh, well, we'd love to include this amnesty reform, but we've heard the Senate parliamentarian isn't going to allow it under what's called the Byrd rule. That's the rule that empowers the Senate parliamentarian to make this calculus. And then when things fall out of the bill as a consequence of the Byrd rule, they are inaptly described as the Byrd droppings of the reconciliation.
Yeah, but this is not constitutional. This is just a Senate rule, right? And so this one person, who I don't know if she's good or bad, her name is Elizabeth McDonough. She's been there since 2012, is one of the most powerful people in America. Is that correct?
That's right. That's how the senators behave. But it is sort of, to your exact point, it is a prison of their own construction. Right. If I were Senate Majority Leader, if Rick Scott were Senate Majority Leader, he would just say, no. This is what we deem appropriate. We're in the majority. The majority deems that for the reconciliation to pass, this is what's in, this is what's out. Presumably, J.D. Vance could do that as the constitutional presiding officer of the Senate. He could just go and, by function of the Constitution, seize that power from the Senate parliamentarian. To do that, we would then have to awaken all of the senators with smelling salts after they've clutched their pearls and passed out aghast with the violation of norms. But we're either all prisoners of the Senate parliamentarian, or there has to be some exercise of the power of the majority to get our accomplishments into this first critical piece of legislation.